Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Better Call Saul, where we have Saul Klein with us today. Hey, Saul.
Jennifer, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, thanks.
Good. And we have Rachael Real. Rachael,
Hey.
hello.
Hey, everybody, what's up?
So we are going to be talking about property rights. And Saul, your position is that they are under attack, and people's views on this is becoming more and more like further apart. Can you give us some context on the conversation and why we care?
Yeah. So property, first of all, it's back to basic understanding of property, real property and personal property.
Right.
And real property brings with it all kinds of advantages and things you can do with it. And those things you can do are called a bundle of rights. And so when we buy property, we buy it. I always use like props when I used to teach this. And I'd say, do you have the right to possess it? Do you have the right to use it? Do you have the right to rent it out? Do you have the right to pay taxes on it?
Right.
These things are called a bundle of rights.
Okay.
And when you buy a property, you buy all or part of
all of it.
Well, never all, because always the government has some.
They also have a right to tax you on it.
But you want as much of the rights as you can, and then you want to be able to do with it. Typically, if it's your property, that's to possess, to use, to dispose of it to the exclusion of others.
Right.
And you don't want people saying, "Hey, you can't build a house on that property." Why not? Because you can't, because it's not zoned for that.
Or you can't have 27 barns on your property or 18 couches outside.
I bought the property. Yeah. I own it.
Right.
I have this bundle of rights. Well, who establishes what the limitations are on those bundle of rights, and who fights for the property owners to maintain that bundle of rights? And the answer is the National Association of Realtors and our other PACs to some extent, but for me, federally, the National Association of Realtors and our PAC. And what do they try to help us do? They try to help us maintain private property rights. Now, what's happened over the years through certain types of local legislation and attitudes, private property rights have eroded. Now, like, you can't charge more rent than this. You get certain things, you start to erode. Now, the government also wants people to own property, so they give you certain tax advantages.
Right.
And when they want to ratchet that down, they kind of take some of that away. So the government has,
like if you build in these areas, or then you can get like a tax advantage, something like that.
So property, and in particular real property, very important. But how do you define it? You define it by the rights you have, what you can do with it. And some people believe if you buy it, you should be able to do whatever you want with it, without exception.
That seems a little
where you put the pig
ridiculous.
farm next to the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, right? and that's private property, I think. So you got that extreme,
right?
And you got the other extreme is saying, no, if it has any effect on human beings anywhere, we're going to regulate it.
Right.
Then you got that.
There has to be a happy medium somewhere.
Yeah.
And so there has to be, but people have to fight for those rights. And typically those fights are done in the legislatures. And so we have a voice in the legislature. We, as property owners, as realtors, yes, but also as property owners. And as a matter of fact, I think that the realtors ought to open up a category of membership for property owners, because they're the ones that fight for private property rights. NAR, nobody else, or a few other entities fight for that. And so what are these property rights? And if you talk to other realtors, and Rachel, you'll probably, and Jennifer, know this, if you talk to other realtors of different generations, they have different ideas about what private property rights mean.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. And so two realtors, I might say, we should fight for this. We should invest our RPAC dollars in this. And some other realtor might look at me and say, are you crazy? Why would we do that?
What do you think is the biggest controversy right now about it?
Or
what's the biggest fight?
Right now, we've discussed this. I believe, and certain people believe, that the land use policy in the United States is going to change dramatically.
I mean, it has to change because there's no more land and there's more people.
Well, exactly. And those things are going to be put in place. And actually, if you look at it very closely, I like a lot of the ideas about doing a lot of, and I know that none of this is going to happen overnight. This is a 50 to 100-year plan. We do
Right.
know that right now, if they haven't passed it already, Congress is fighting over $3.5 trillion to add to spending to kind of change things. So there's an effort by the government to change land use policies, and change of land use policies will change value, and change of value doesn't necessarily mean less value.
No, it could be anything.
And
But
that's
that is
happening right now.
interesting. And we have talked about land use before, especially as it relates to like, there's a lot of, if the world continues to change on its trajectory, it's going to be a lot more virtual. People travel more. You wouldn't be so like stuck with where you're at. And so then as that relates to like land use, I could have see more multifamily buildings or buildings that were traditionally offices going into like some type of like affordable housing, whereas those were like zoned commercial. Now they're residential, but everything comes with like every benefit also has a drawback, right? Like that's just physics.
Right. Well, and I look at
to a
like,
degree though, you can mitigate,
Yeah, you
Right,
can
right.
mitigate,
right? You can
but then there's
mitigate.
always this stuff that you don't think about, right? And the
Well,
effect that it has.
That's a
that we
great
all-
point. And hopefully now though, we have data. Like we
Yeah.
used to say, under all is the land,
You
under
love
all
data.
is data.
Yes,
And
exactly.
so we now have this data, and almost in the future, we're going to be able to get real time. We're going to be able to pick an address out and look at a property and look at real time, what's going on that property, what's going on in the neighborhood, what's going on around it. Should I loan against this property? If I'm a
Right.
lender, should I buy in this area? All that's going to be totally visible to everybody because of the data is there for them to access. And so,
But
and
like,
then
how does the choices that, like, can we talk about like some possibilities of how it could change and how that would affect us as real estate agents? Like, what would that do for us or
Well,
not? What would change?
so yeah, I would be looking for opportunities
Uh-huh.
first, and then I would change based on the opportunities that I
Of
find.
course, right?
And
Yeah, that's what we
so-
all did in like 09 and 10. It's like,
Yeah. So right now,
oh, we have to learn how to do short sales now.
yeah, you just right.
Yeah.
So let's look for the opportunity that's there, and
Right.
there is, because there's a big clue. We know that a bunch of money is going to come down into infrastructure, and we know that we talk about the elements of value and the four great forces that influence value: physical, social, economic, and political. The four great forces, and the physical are the quality of the conveniences of the stores and the right. So if money's going to go into infrastructure, where the money goes into infrastructure, probably you will have increased valuations.
That makes sense.
Right. And now they're also talking about transportation, more light rail,
More like
rail,
or like walkable, easier access,
So now if
less
you
like
build
car.
closer, you build closer to that, you'll get density bonuses. You maybe get good interest rates because money came down from the federal government. It's been funded. So if I were still active today selling real estate, I would be talking to my city council people. I would be finding out I would be going to the planning meetings, used to do all this stuff, right?
Mhm.
Find out where are you getting any of the money?
Yeah,
And they're going to be proud that they're getting the money. So they're going to want
right.
yes, okay, great. Can you tell us
What are you
what
doing
part of
with
town
it?
you're going to get the money in? Right. Because if we know before everybody else, it gives us a little edge.
But isn't that too like why it's important to understand and be involved with RPAC? Because the RPAC, they kind of filter some of the candidates and say, hey, here's some of the candidates we're supporting and why. And then that gives you like a starting point as an agent, right?
Yeah. So it's a terrific source of information. So when you get information from RPAC, you get in both sides, right? You get all, and you make your decision and vote or to give your money to whichever individual you like based on their positions.
Right.
And not all realtors have the same positions.
No.
And so they'll give to either side. And that's good because we always say we're looking for the realtor party, not the R or the D, but the realtor party. And that means as realtors, we want to vote for things that enhance and protect private property rights.
Right.
And I don't care if you're a Republican, if you vote for things, to a degree, or a Democrat, to a degree, if you vote for the things, I'm interested in what you do about the things that that surround property, because I believe that property should be the center of everybody's life.
Yeah.
And so I'm going for those things that I believe benefit property. And then so the RPAC gives me an opportunity, actually screens and sends out the background information of these different candidates from around the country. So I can choose to give my money to those people. Now, statewide and local wide, our state PACs and our local PACs do the same sorts of things, right?
Mhm.
And again, even if you don't contribute, just knowing about it's valuable.
Right. Know
Right,
where
you
to put
should-
your vote anyway.
Yeah.
Rachel, what do you think could change, like, as this money gets distributed and plans go in place? What do you think will happen?
I look at for my community, we're western suburbs of Chicago, and I would say the biggest things that affect property values for just typical residents in the community would be things like I don't even know if you want to call them granny pods. That's kind of one of the names they've taken on, but being able to put a secondary structure in your backyard, like a
Oh,
tiny home, you
yeah.
know, so that you can have an in-law live with you. Right
Right.
now, those are not allowed anywhere within I don't even know, 150-mile radius of where I'm at.
Right.
But were those things to become available, especially for people who have larger chunks of land, that could increase property values, give people the ability to work out of their home, give people the ability to live multi-generational, but not in one, in a main primary house. That would be huge. You've got
Yeah, it
you've got
would
an
be a
aging
lot
population.
different. Right.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So you're talking about
Absolutely.
utility, right? Four
Right.
elements of value: demand, utility, scarcity, and transferability. And utility is the intensity of use. And if
Right.
you can
You want to
increase
maximize the amount of use you
you-
have for your particular property, you should have the
typically that
ability to do that.
typically
Maybe.
that increases the value of a property.
Absolutely.
Right, it doesn't
Maybe,
take-
maybe not though, because there are, I talked to an agent, and I forget where she is. I forget. Anyway, they are in certain areas allowed to make a single family home into a multifamily home as long as there's only one front door. And I don't know, depending on your neighborhood, I don't know that if you had a handful of those, if that would actually decrease the value.
Well, it might, but here's the deal. On a single property, it's going to increase the value of that property. When they change the zoning from more restrictive to less restrictive, that's going to increase the value. Now, what happens 5 years, 10 years downstream as the neighborhood transitions? Because that's what happens.
Right.
There'll be a transition and you'll reach a point. Hopefully, this is what the city planners hope for. You'll reach an equilibrium, and then the neighborhood will be a solid neighborhood. It'll be diverse. It'll be mixed
Right.
use. And
There's a
30
lot
years
of mixed use stuff going in Cincinnati and in
So-
northern Kentucky where we're at.
well,
It's a
the
lot
mixed
of
use
mixed
ties right into
stuff.
walkability, doesn't it?
Exactly. I think
Right.
that's the plan, right?
And that's been around. I got involved in the revitalization of a part of San Diego back in the 1980s. And this was about getting federal funding. I think I talked about this, and being able to revitalize the area.
Mhm.
And one of the things that we were talking about then, we're talking in the early 80s, was what they call mixed use,
Yeah.
right? And that back then, and now you see a lot more of it. And back then, when we would and then I would go out and talk to my real estate clients. I would say, here's what's going to happen in this area. You're going to be able to do this. You're going to be able to build these types of, right? And so this is why I would buy it, because I could buy it for this price today. But if we did this to it, it can go up. So mixed use was a real popular thing to do.
Mhm.
And if you did that, you got certain bonuses and benefits. And mixed use plays into walkability, and walkability plays into climate change.
Climate change, which is huge right now and will be.
So that's why if you look at government objectives, one is to reduce the carbon footprint.
Mhm.
Right. Well, how do you do that? Well, you stop people from driving as much. Well, how do you do that? Without taking their cars away.
Right.
You take their roads away, or you make it too expensive and you give them alternatives.
Or you get, Tesla, Elon Musk will invent just like the self-driving cars, and it's basically like an Uber.
Eventually we'll have flying self-driving cars.
Yeah, right. Exactly. You just call it up. You don't own the car. But
You'll
see,
get
that
in.
could translate to houses too, right? So
But-
you're in this area, it's an Airbnb, but everywhere.
Right. It's an Airbnb.
sort of.
Right.
And what if nobody owned it? What if it was what? Government?
Well, somebody has to own it. because somebody has to, now, the government has tried to own things. See, the government has tried many well-intentioned programs with unintended consequences and very
Right.
poor results.
Yeah.
And so while it's great to hear the government talking about this, and I want to get behind it as much as I can, and I want to find the opportunities, so those people that can take and make opportunity and can get the government money, it's going to go somewhere and make the neighborhood better and increase the property tax base in there. I'm all for it. And giving the government too much control is a tight one. And the
Yeah.
only way that you're going to stop that is if you have good advocacy.
Yeah.
And the only way you're going to have good advocacy is if you contribute to your PACs.
Now, and on another note, then, is there something or a resource, or is there a way for members of the community or homeowners, property owners to contribute or use RPAC as a resource for themselves too, even if they're not realtors, if they're concerned about private property rights, what can a homeowner do to get involved?
That's a great question. I don't know, but I would, again, think if I was selling real estate, that'd be a great thing to kind of reach out to people. It's something that's different to reach out to people.
Absolutely.
Reach out with education from a neutral position about
Exactly.
how certain things are going to impact that neighborhood. And
Right,
then if
right.
you're working on these things and it's your work and you're sitting on the city council committee that got appointed for this, right? And that's the way you get involved in, and that's a great differentiator.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely.
But I do think, I mean, yeah, I agree with you. I think that's a really
That's not something that realtors often talk
don't
about
really.
with their clients. Right. I mean, you just hear a lot of people complain that I can't have chickens. I can't put a tiny home in my backyard. I can't, those are the hot button issues in this area. But, then they just they complain, but then they don't know what to do with that information. They
Right.
want it, but then how do they get it? And
see,
how does that reflect the overall issue of private property rights?
When the city decided it wanted to utilize federal government funding to increase the value of a depressed neighborhood in San Diego, multiple depressed neighborhoods in San Diego, it was going to, and if it could increase the value of the property in those depressed areas, then the tax base would go up and the city would make more money. So the federal government had these boxes full of money, and they were willing to dump these boxes full of money into areas into cities where the city was going to take that money and show the business people how to use it.
Okay.
So that strings came with the federal government. So here's the money, but part of it, you got to get people out there. You got to teach all these people how to do it. So that's where a guy from the city was hired. He was a consultant, came into my real estate office. His name was Gary Roseweber. And Gary said, hey, we're going to try to do this. We're going to revitalize this area. And we love the neighborhood. We said, that's all great. How do you do it? Well, you got to create a business association. How do you do that? Well, I got all the papers right here. You can do it. And you're the president and you're the vice president. So in my office, 4 of us. And then we had meetings and nobody came to the meetings but us. And Gary says, okay, here's the next thing we're going to do. And we're going to sign up the other business. And all of this was laid out by a consultant, by volunteers, right?
Yeah.
Business people who then got funding that completely revitalized the commercial area.
But then don't you have the other issue then, like as you kind of revitalize some of these areas, you're also dealing with like gentrification on a lot of them too.
Yeah. So
and then what happens to the people who have been living there?
So that's a great point. So whenever you do this, and this maybe hasn't been done as much in the past, but what you have to do is you have to work to make sure that you minimize to the best degree possible. It can be done, those types of effects. And so now if you go in and take a holistic view of a city before you fund it, and you find out where the transportation lines are and where the good roads are and where the bad roads are and where the good shopping, you figure all that out ahead of time, then you put your new plan on top of it, you can start to minimize any displacement.
Yeah, but we haven't been doing a good job of that because affordable housing is I would say pretty almost crisis level, right?
Yeah, well, it is, and a number of reasons for that. We don't build enough housing. Why don't we build enough housing? A couple of reasons for that. Number one, people don't want it in their backyard. Right. So there's these reasons, and then it's back to demand, utility, scarcity, and transferability, the 4 elements of value. And so it's scarce. And so that's why there's these movements to allow you to intensify the use and build more than one unit, because that's more utility.
Right.
You're going to be able to.
Yeah, but then you have some consequences with that, right? So you have like a drain on like the plumbing and all the utilities.
You have to build,
Potentially.
you have to build out for that. That has to be part of
Right.
it. Here's something else that happens.
Right.
You have to have more open space, because as you start putting more people into confined areas, you need to have more open space. So
Right.
where are you going to, but then maybe the open space is the part that was the, right? But you got to
Right.
look at the whole thing. And that's not how it's been done in the past, because we didn't have computers that were powerful enough to crunch enough data to figure this kind of stuff out. But we do
Now we
now.
do.
Now we do.
This is like a big topic, and I
Right.
hope
This is a small
people
small part of a much bigger conversation.
yeah, and I hope people are like realizing like it is important to understand property rights. You actually,
Yes.
as a realtor, you do care about it. It does, it
Yes.
affects your clients, it affects your livelihood. And
It affects a lot of things that a lot of agents don't think about.
yeah, I mean, ourselves and everybody.
Right.
True.
It's
So,
it's your business, right? And so
mhm,
yes, you sell a property but that's a product.
yeah,
And part of the product knowledge is the things that go, and realtors often, some realtors I know pride themselves
mhm,
Yes.
in knowing about the neighborhood and knowing about these kinds of things. And but you're right, it's not the majority, that's for sure.
it's
No,
not.
definitely not.
Well, it's not something that we talk about as agents. It is more
Right.
talking about like you said, Saul, like product, like how do you get this product sold? Like what do they want in the product? And like that's it. But it's so much more.
That's a tiny little portion of what's a
Exactly.
much bigger picture. Right.
Well, so if people have, I mean, I know that they're going to have questions. What is the best way to get a hold of you? What's the best place to get the data?
He is Saul at bettercallsaul.realtor.
Okay.
Saul at bettercallsaul.realtor, and the Data Advocate. Every day we're making it better and better. TheDataAdvocate.com, where we believe that data doesn't have a voice. And so because it doesn't have a voice, people give it away
Mhm,
and people waste the value that's in it. Somebody's got to give data a voice. And that's what we're doing at the Data Advocate. We're trying to let people know that there's more to what they see in the world today.
Yeah.
And under all of it is the data.
Yeah, that's awesome. Rachel, if people have a referral in Chicago,
Best way to reach me is on cell phone, phone or text at 630-542-8688.
awesome. And then if you want to get a hold of me, it's 513-400-1691. All right. Thanks again, guys. Really appreciate you being on.
Thanks,
Hey,
all.
good to
Thanks,
see
Jen.
you again.
Bye.
Bye-bye.